A homeless boy saves a billionaire's life, only to uncover a shocking betrayal by those closest to him. What happens next will change both of their lives forever. At age 82, Franklin Whitmore had accomplished everything a man could dream of. From humble beginnings, he had built an empire that spanned multiple industries, from real estate to technology, and had amassed a fortune that placed him among the richest people in the world. His name was synonymous with success, and his sprawling estates, luxury yachts, and private jets symbolized a life lived in opulence. Yet, for all his wealth and accomplishments, Franklin was looking for something he couldn't buy: lasting love. Franklin's life trajectory was marked by 2 failed marriages. His first wife had been his college sweetheart, and their union lasted nearly 3 decades before the pressures of their incessant work schedule drove them apart. His second marriage, a whirlwind affair with a socialite, had fallen apart after just a few years, and the relationship faltered due to mutual misunderstandings and mistrust. Despite these setbacks, Franklin's faith in love remained steadfast. He had always believed that someone somewhere would understand him, not because of his wealth, but because of the man he really was. When Franklin met Vanessa, a 23-year-old aspiring model, she thought she had found the right person. Vanessa was stunningly beautiful, with long blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, and a magnetic charm that captivated everyone who met her. She seemed to be really in love with Franklin, and her affection was convincing enough to make him feel years younger. In his company, Franklin experienced a joy he hadn't felt in decades. Vanessa became Franklin's world. He spoiled her in every way imaginable, gifting her with expensive jewelry, designer clothes, and extravagant vacations to exclusive destinations. No gift was too grandiose, no request too indulgent. For Franklin, her happiness was paramount. She had full access to his wealth, a tacit testament to his absolute trust in her. Franklin's devotion to Vanessa blinded him to the truth. Unbeknownst to him, Vanessa had never truly loved him. Shortly after her marriage, she had been reunited with her ex-lover, Caleb, a man closer to her age. Together, they had devised a plan to eliminate Franklin and reclaim his vast fortune. Vanessa played her part perfectly, hiding her duplicity behind a mask of affection as she worked with Caleb to prepare for the day when they would put his plan into action. Despite Vanessa's betrayal, Franklin did not find out. Her daily life followed a predictable routine, which Vanessa exploited to perfection. Every afternoon, Franklin and Vanessa dined at one of the city's most exclusive 7-star restaurants, a ritual that had become synonymous with their relationship. For Franklin, these lunches were precious moments of connection, a chance to enjoy the glow of Vanessa's company while enjoying the best culinary experiences the world had to offer. One particular morning, Franklin woke up excited, eagerly awaiting the hour of your lunch reservation at an acclaimed French restaurant. She dressed meticulously, choosing a tailored suit and one of her signature pocket squares. Vanessa, however, seemed unusually calm as she sat on the edge of the bed, her posture hunched over and her expression tired. Concern flashed across Franklin's chest as he walked up to her and placed a delicate hand on her shoulder. Vanessa looked at him with tired eyes and told him that she was not feeling well. She explained that she was too fatigued to accompany him to lunch and quietly apologized for disappointing him. Franklin frowned in concern. He knelt beside him and his voice was filled with concern as he assured her that her health came first. Without hesitation, he offered to cancel the reservation and stay home to take care of her. Vanessa, however, insisted that she should not alter her plans. He told her that a quiet afternoon to rest alone would help her recover faster. He urged him to go to lunch and suggested that he invite one of his friends over so he could continue to have fun. Franklin hesitated. His love for Vanessa made him reluctant to part with her. However, his kind, reassuring words eventually eased his worries. After kissing her on the forehead and telling her to call him if she needed anything, Franklin left. As he walked away, he couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt, worried that he had made the wrong decision by leaving her alone. He decided that lunch would be short so he could go home and see how he was doing. Meanwhile, Vanessa's attitude changed the moment Franklin left the house. His expression hardened, and the feigned weakness in his posture disappeared. He quickly retrieved his phone and called Caleb, his voice firm as he informed him that the moment they had been waiting for had arrived. With Franklin out of the house and his alibi firmly established, the next phase of his plan was set in motion. Unaware that the betrayal was unfolding behind his back, Franklin arrived at the restaurant to meet his friend. His thoughts turned to Vanessa as he walked to the reserved table, hoping that she would feel better soon. For Franklin, this lunch was just another part of his routine, a small treat in a life built on order and trust. He had no idea that this seemingly normal day would bring him closer to danger than he had ever imagined. The bustling streets near the upscale restaurant where Franklin Whitmore regularly ate lunch were unusually quiet that day. Franklin had left home to have dinner with a close friend, thinking about Vanessa and her supposed illness. He sat down in a booth on the corner and engaged in a polite conversation, unaware that a dark plot was being hatched a few blocks away. Meanwhile, Vanessa and Caleb moved quickly to execute their plan. The two met near Franklin's car, parked on a secluded street. Caleb carried a small set of tools. His actions were methodical and deliberate as he knelt beside the vehicle. The brake line, essential for the operation of the car, was his objective. Caleb carefully inspected the landing gear, identified the line, and drew a small, sharp blade from his equipment. Vanessa was standing nearby, her arms cringing. He scanned the surroundings for any sign of movement. Her youthful beauty contrasted with the cold expression on her face. He urged Caleb to work quickly, quietly but firmly. Caleb nodded, gripping the blade tightly as he began to cut the brake line precisely. The rubber tube briefly resisted before giving way under the sharp blade. The liquid inside the line began to drip onto the pavement, forming a small dark puddle under the car. Caleb wiped his hands with a rag and checked his work, making sure the brakes failed as intended. She looked at Vanessa, who nodded slightly in satisfaction. The two exchanged a conspiratorial glance before Caleb put away his tools and stood up. Unbeknownst to them, a pair of watchful eyes had seen it all. Across the street, a homeless young black man sat on the sidewalk, blending in with the background of the busy urban environment. He had been prowling around the area, watching passers-by and, from time to time, glancing at parked cars for leftover food or loose change. His keen eyes caught the unusual activity around Franklin's car, and he watched Caleb intently crouch under the vehicle. The boy's initial curiosity turned to restlessness when he observed the couple's furtive behavior. He noticed the tools in Caleb's hands and the deliberate movements under the car. Although I couldn't hear their conversation, his tense body language said it all. Something was wrong. As Vanessa and Caleb drove away from the car, once their task was accomplished, the boy's gaze followed them. He sat there, his mind racing. What should I do? He considered calling someone or rushing to get help, but circumstances made him hesitant. Experience had taught him that people rarely took his words seriously. Instead, he decided to stay close to the car and keep watch, his instincts urging him not to leave. Back at the restaurant, Franklin was finishing his lunch. The meal had been pleasant enough, though she found that her thoughts frequently returned to Vanessa. I hoped she was resting comfortably at home, recovering from any ailments that would have made her feel bad. The friend sitting across from him commented on Franklin's absent-minded behavior, but Franklin dismissed it with a polite smile. After exchanging a few more words, Franklin signaled for the bill to be brought to him. He thanked his friend for accompanying him and headed towards the valet parking, which quickly recovered his car. As Franklin approached the vehicle, he noticed the boy was standing nearby, nervously switching feet. The boy, who plucked up courage, stepped forward just as Franklin opened the driver's side door. He hesitated for a moment and then blurted out what he had seen. He explained that a man and a woman, matching Vanessa and Caleb's description, had tampered with the car while Franklin was away. He spoke quickly and detailed how Caleb had cut something under the car with a knife. Franklin paused, surprised by the boy's urgency. She looked at him with some suspicion, her mind struggling to reconcile the story with her unwavering trust in Vanessa. He thanked the boy for his concern. Boutour dismissed the warning, assuring him that everything was probably fine. Franklin's faith in his wife overcame any doubt, and he attributed the encounter to a misunderstanding or exaggeration. The boy watched helplessly as Franklin got into the car. Despite the billionaire's polite farewell, the boy stood there, quietly waiting for Franklin to reconsider his decision. Franklin started the engine, and the soft hum of the engine offered no indication of the danger lurking beneath the vehicle. Without looking at him again, he shifted into gear and drove away, leaving the boy alone on the sidewalk. Franklin Whitmore was driving down a winding country road, while the evening sun cast long shadows over the gentle hills. The quiet stretch of road offered him a respite from the bustling city he had just left behind, and Franklin found himself reflecting on the nice lunch he had shared with his friend. His thoughts wandered back to Vanessa. Despite the boy's previous warning, Franklin dismissed the idea that his wife could be involved in something so malicious. The soft hum of the engine filled the interior of the car as Franklin approached a bend in the road. It was at that moment that he instinctively pressed the brake pedal to reduce the vehicle's speed. To his surprise, the pedal sank to the ground without resistance. A sinking sensation came over him as he pressed harder, but the car showed no signs of slowing down. The brakes had completely failed. For a brief moment, Franklin's mind went into overdrive, threatening to panic. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, forcing himself to remain calm. Decades of experience in crisis management in his business empire had taught him the importance of thinking clearly in high-pressure situations. This time was no different, although the stakes were much more personal. Franklin quickly evaluated her options. The road ahead had a very sharp curve and, if he continued at the speed he was going, he risked crashing catastrophically into the trees that lined the road. Instead of panicking, he looked to his right and saw an expanse of grass gently descending toward a rocky outcrop. He made a split-second decision and turned the steering wheel sharply, knocking the car off the asphalt and onto the grass. The vehicle shook violently as it exited the asphalt road and the tires skidded on the uneven ground. Franklin braced himself and firmly gripped the steering wheel as he headed toward the largest rock in sight. His intention was clear: to deliberately crash the car in a controlled manner, avoiding a worse outcome. The impact came quickly. The car hit the rock and the front end was deformed by the force of the impact. Inside the cabin, the airbags deployed with a loud hissing sound, protecting Franklin from impact. The sudden jolt left him breathless and disoriented for a moment. As the dust settled, Franklin opened his eyes, his heart pounding in his chest. The smell of burning rubber and engine oil filled the air, but the security systems had done their job. Aside from a few minor bruises, he was unharmed. Slowly, he reached the door handle, his hands trembling slightly from the adrenaline rushing through his body. Franklin got out of the wrecked car and watched the damage with a mixture of relief and disbelief. The hood was so wrinkled that it could not be recognized, and the steam whistled from the exposed engine. His gaze drifted to the brake duct, where the fluid continued to drip non-stop on the grass. The homeless boy's warning came back to his mind suddenly. The memory of the boy's anxious expression and urgent tone suddenly took on a new meaning. Franklin had dismissed the warning, convinced of Vanessa's loyalty, but now the pieces were beginning to fall into place. The brake failure was not an accident. Someone had deliberately sabotaged the car, and the boy had tried to tell him. When Franklin realized it, he thought of Vanessa. Could she have been involved? The thought was almost too painful to bear, but the evidence was undeniable. She knew his history with Caleb, she had mentioned him once in passing, but she never imagined that she would betray him in such a cruel way. Determined to uncover the truth, Franklin leaned on the car to catch his breath and began to formulate a plan. He pulled out his phone, his hands still shaking slightly, and checked his contacts. His old friend and trusted confidant, Arthur, was the first person that came to mind. Franklin needed someone he trusted to help him carry out his idea. Franklin called Arthur and explained the situation in short, urgent sentences. He described the brake failure, the homeless boy's warning, and his growing suspicion of Vanessa. Franklin ordered Arthur to call Vanessa, posing as an official who was communicating tragic news to him. The message was simple. Franklin had died in a car accident and authorities needed her to confirm her identity as a next of kin. Arthur, though surprised by the story, accepted without hesitation. He understood the gravity of the situation and promised to make the call sound as convincing as possible. Franklin thanked him before hanging up, while his mind was already thinking about the next steps. Franklin, who was still standing next to the wrecked car, took a deep breath to calm himself. I knew I had to stay calm and focused. The plan wasn't just to confirm Vanessa's betrayal, but to make sure she and Caleb were caught in the act. The idea of setting a trap for the people who had tried to kill him filled Franklin with an iron determination. As Franklin waited for Arthur to finish the call, he began to walk away from the crash site, his footsteps rustling gently on the gravel of the shoulder of the road. He wanted to distance himself from the place to give the illusion that the accident had indeed been fatal. Despite the pain in his body, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The betrayal hurt him deeply, but Franklin refused to allow him to define it. His years of experience in high-stakes situations had taught him that the best way to face adversity was with action. He decided to see the plan through to the end, ensuring that justice was served for him and preventing Vanessa and Caleb from carrying out their malicious plan against anyone else. As night fell, Franklin Whitmore returned to his estate. The air around him, it was cold and silent. Having survived the attempt on his life, Franklin's thoughts were no longer clouded by disbelief. The evidence of Vanessa's betrayal and the homeless boy's warning now formed a clear picture of the betrayal she had ignored. Though fury boiled beneath his serene exterior, Franklin knew he had to act with precision. Franklin had taken deliberate steps to ensure that his return was kept secret. He ordered his driver to park several blocks away and walked the remaining distance to his home under cover of darkness. His body was still enduring the pains of the crash, but he overcame the discomfort, determined to confront the people who had tried to kill him. Arriving at the side entrance of his mansion, Franklin opened the door quietly and entered. The house was strangely quiet, the wide hallways lacking the usual bustle. Moving carefully so as not to attract attention, Franklin made his way to the living room, where a faint murmur of voices hung in the air. As he got closer, the voices grew louder, interspersed with bursts of laughter. Franklin stopped just outside the door, listening intently. The sound of Vanessa's unmistakable laughter sent a shiver down his spine. However, the words that followed stoked a fire of anger within him. Vanessa and Caleb were sitting together on the couch, champagne glasses in hand. They toasted what they believed would be the end of Franklin, and their conversation turned to the enormous fortune they now hoped to inherit. Vanessa talked about the freedom they would enjoy and the extravagant life they could lead now, while Caleb smiled and congratulated her for executing the plan perfectly. Franklin clenched his fists as he heard them laugh at his supposed death. His callous disregard for his life and his greed laid bare the depth of his betrayal. However, he remained calm, knowing that his anger would only serve him if he channeled it into justice. Upon entering the room, Franklin made his presence known. Vanessa and Caleb froze, the laughter dying off mid-sentence as their heads turned toward him. Their faces paled, surprise and fear replacing their expressions of smugness. Franklin's piercing gaze pierced them, his silence more powerful than any words he could have uttered. Before they could recover or make excuses, Franklin pulled out her phone and contacted authorities. He gave a brief but firm account of the facts, making sure that the urgency of the situation was clear. As she waited for the police to arrive, Franklin stood motionless, her calm demeanor contrasting sharply with Vanessa's growing panic. Vanessa stammered feeble apologies, trying to justify her actions, but her words wavered under Franklin's unyielding gaze. Caleb, on the other hand, remained silent, his defiance giving way to resignation as he realized the reality of his failed plan. When police arrived, Franklin calmly explained the details of the attempted murder and presented the evidence he had gathered, including the damaged brake line on his car and the homeless boy's testimony. The officers wasted no time in arresting Vanessa and Caleb, who were too stunned and frightened enough to resist. As they were led away in handcuffs, Vanessa turned to Franklin, tears streaming down her face. His pleas for forgiveness fell on deaf ears. Franklin had seen enough of his deception to know that his tears were born not of regret, but of fear of the consequences he now faced. The legal proceedings proceeded quickly. With overwhelming evidence against them, Vanessa and Caleb were found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and sentenced to life in prison. The judge's words were severe in condemning his greed and lack of remorse. Justice had been served, and Franklin felt the case had been closed, knowing that they would never have a chance to harm anyone else. Once the dust had settled, Franklin turned his attention to the boy who had tried to save his life. The memory of the boy's serious warning weighed heavily on his mind. Determined to show his gratitude, Franklin returned to the streets of the city where he had last seen him. Some time passed, but Franklin finally found the boy sitting near a busy intersection. His small body hunched over to protect himself from the cold. He approached him gently, offered him a warm smile, and extended his hand. The boy hesitated, his eyes wide with surprise and uncertainty. Franklin spoke to the boy with genuine kindness, thanked him for his bravery, and explained how his warning had prevented a tragedy. She offered to change the boy's life, promising him a home, an education, and the support he needed to build a better future. The boy's initial hesitation morphed into quiet acceptance when he realized Franklin's intentions were sincere. Over the next few weeks, Franklin kept his word. The boy moved to Franklin's estate, where he was given a comfortable room and access to everything he needed. Franklin enrolled him in school, hired tutors to help him regain the education he had lost, and made sure he had clothes, food, and stability for the first time in his life. For Franklin, the boy's presence brought a new sense of purpose. After betrayal and loss, the opportunity to mentor and support someone who had shown him genuine kindness was a source of healing. Together, they formed an unlikely bond, and their shared experiences created a bridge between their very different worlds. As the years passed, Franklin devoted more time and resources to helping others, using her wealth to support causes close to her heart. Free from deception and surrounded by a sense of renewed purpose, he found comfort in giving. Through her actions, Franklin proved that even in the face of betrayal, resilience and kindness can transform pain into progress. Disclaimer: the story you just watched is fictional, created to explore themes of compassion, betrayal, and the transformative power of unexpected connections. Its purpose is to raise awareness and inspire empathy in our daily interactions.